All right, a big shout out to our audience out there this evening, and we want to welcome you to another live edition of the WGSN-DB Going Solo Veterans Corner. And of course, I'm your host, retired Army First Sergeant Paul Holbert, coming to you live from Northern Virginia. And before we get started, I want to thank all of you for joining us. I also want to thank for those that don't get a chance to join us live, that do catch our recording shows. We had a big turnout on our last recorded show, and it's because of our audience and folks like you who tune in that help make us one of the top 25 podcasts to watch here in Northern Virginia. So we really appreciate your support. I also want to go to our sponsors, because without their support, it would be very difficult for us to operate as well. And first, I want to thank Quest Jewelers from Merrifield, Virginia. Folks, Quest, I tell you every week, you got to check them out. Pete Tane has since retired, but turned his part of the business over to his daughter, Ashley, and she is there still working with her uncle. So even though Pete's gone, Ashley has jumped right in, and she's learned the business very well. I really suggest you check out their website, questjewelers.com. Give them a call. Not only do they have a showroom of beautiful jewelry, but they are excellent at making custom design pieces. So check them out, see what they can do for you. I also want to thank Nationwide IT Services. NIS is a service-disabled veteran-owned small business owned by retired Army Warrant Officer C.K. Park. CK and his crew, they have offices all over the United States supporting a very wide variety of contracts, both government and private sector. If whether you're in need of business help with IT, security, training, professional development, or performance management, you can give his folks a call and they'll be glad to talk with you. So check them out. I also want to thank our newest sponsor, Hill and Ponton, PA, veteran disability attorneys based in Florida. Folks, Hill and Ponton have been around for over 30 years, and they specialize in assisting veterans and their families with disability and getting through the VA and navigating to make sure that our veterans get what they deserve when they're struggling to do that. So if you think you might have a question, you can also look at their website, because they provide free webinars, and they will also answer questions over the website. So check them out. If you need help, you have any questions about disability claims, or you're struggling to get something done, see if they can help you. All right. So I want to welcome tonight's guest, and I'm really happy to have retired Marine Captain Garret Biss. Garret was a pilot in the Marine Corps and retired in 2015. He's now an addiction recovery coach and a TEDx speaker. And, you know, I think Garret, what led him to that was, I know after you retired, you were struggling with a lot of things a lot of us veterans do, you know, whether it's anxiety, PTSD, you know, those types of things that kind of led you into what you're doing now. We're going to talk a little bit more about your addiction recovery residence in North Carolina and Valiant Path, but I just wanted to introduce you to the audience first and tell you thank you so much for being here, and thank you for your service as well.
Paul, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited about this, and thank you for your service.
Yeah, so Garret, I want to start off. You went into the Marine Corps. Tell us a little bit about your journey going into the Marines and what you were doing, because I understand you were a pilot, and I know you've also continued in the Civil Air Patrol now. But how did you get that start?
So great question. So I graduated high school. Actually, I went to a special high school program so I could graduate early. I was so dead set on joining the Marine Corps, even you know, in my mid to late teens, and I realized as in my high school experience that maybe I was getting involved in some things that might preclude that opportunity to join the service. So one thing that I did was I graduated a little early, and that freed me up to join the Marines a little bit early. And March of 1999, I was kidnapped from my home by a Lance Corporal working with the recruiting station. He took me out to MEPS in Tampa to be processed. And then I found myself on the Yellow Footprints, and, you know, an interesting journey from that point. Long story short, I served for a couple of years as a fiscal budget technician, or combat accountant is a little bit sexier term for it. but I worked in a comptroller shop, and then I was selected for a commissioning program. So I went off to University of Maryland as a joined to or part of the ROTC unit there, but as an active duty Marine, and then was once I finished my degree, was commissioned, and then after some about a year of basic officer school or basic officer training, was selected for the aviation pipeline, and was very fortunate to have the greatest job, hands down, in the Marine Corps, which is being a KC-130 Juliet pilot.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, it's interesting. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, the KC-130 is one of the kind of mid-size or large transport. Is that?
That's right. I say it's a sexy cargo plane. It's a very sporty cargo plane. One way to think of it.
The only reason why you call them KCs in the Army, we jumped out of C-130s. We just called them C-130s.
That's right. All of ours are equipped to do aerial refueling for helicopters and jets. So that's the KC variant.
Okay. All right. See, I was not aware of that. That's what that meant. So you were flying around in the sexy cargo plane with the Marine Corps. How did you like that? What did it feel like, being able to fly that plane around?
Man, it's incredible. When I look back on it now, I'm thinking, it's so amazing that at 30 years old, I was, qualified to be an aircraft commander on a C-130, and they toss you the keys to this $40 million aircraft and give you a couple of Marines and a destination and a mission. It's so amazing. And this is actually something we can talk about a little bit later with the transition, which becomes challenging for a lot of veterans, feeling underutilized after they transition from the service, with the amount of responsibility and the demonstrated capability and confidence that we have as veterans, with the roles that we're put in, with the responsibilities that we live into. It's just incredible to me, looking back on it. It didn't seem so, amazing at the time, I guess, because it was just part of the environment that we're a part of. But now looking back on it, thinking about that level of responsibility and that commitment that we had is just incredible. So it was an amazing experience for me. And I took a couple things out of it that have really directed, I guess, the rest of my life and helped me form some of the ambitions or the passions that I have. And one of that was this opportunity to get in an aircraft and fly around the world, see some of the most beautiful places in the world. If we have to stop and do a fuel stop throughout Europe, just see some amazing places, whether it's Sicily, we dropped into Naples, a lot of places around Spain. So just got to see some very amazing places in the world, but also we'd fly some missions and I'd see some of the most destitute and impoverished communities around the world. And something about that really struck me, like a human being having a human experience, that their experience can be so wildly diverse in the way that they experience, their life on this planet. So that really opened my eyes up just to a much greater appreciation for the experiences that I've had and the lifestyle that I've had and that we have here in America. And also inspired in me this desire to do something or do whatever I could to try to make an impact.
Yeah, it's interesting. You say that, what a feeling it was to be turned loose in command of an aircraft like that and fly. One of my bosses before I retired from my civil service career, I worked about 12 years for the FAA in Washington. And one of my bosses was a retired Air Force colonel, and he was a C-5 pilot. And of course, he expressed to me something very similar to what you just said. He said the first time that he took off in command of a C-5 with the crew and they took off, he said that was one of the most nerve-wracking experiences of my life, to be up in a plane that size, knowing that I was the pilot and I was responsible. So, and you're right, when you talk about the amount of responsibility that we get in the military, and then all of a sudden when you leave the military, it seems to just slam on the brakes a lot of times, and you're looking to make that adjustment. So let me ask you this, what made you decide it was time to retire? How did you come to that decision?
That's a great question. So I was afforded an opportunity actually to retire early. So one of the things that happens sometimes in our military is that Congress authorizes early retirements through a program called TARA, or Temporary Early Retirement Authority. So anytime we're downsizing from a major operation and the need to reduce the size of the military force, they offer the opportunity to some people between 15 to 20 years to take an earlier retirement. And when I realized that my MOS was eligible and I was considering some things that were going on in my life and the joy that I'd had in the Marine Corps that far, for when I'd loved it, everything, every experience I wanted to have in the Marine Corps, I had that experience. And part of me was like, you know what? It's been good. It's been a good run this last 16 years.
Yeah.
The Marine Corps is owed, is going to get theirs at some point. So there was a little bit of fear there that the next 4 years might not be doing anything near or closely related to what I wanted to do, or living in a place that I wanted to live. And also, I also had a lot of ambitions and a lot of interest in things that I wanted to do in life. And for the number of years I was in the Marines, I would often say, hey, if I wasn't in the Marines, I'd love to be involved in this, or I'd love to work in this field, or I'd love to experience this or that, or write a book. I know that's something you're really passionate about is writing. And there was this long list of things like, man, if I wasn't in the Marines, I would do this. So when I was afforded that opportunity to retire early, I was like, all right, well, now I better, it's like show up or shut up. I've got to prove that I really wanted to pursue those things. So I appreciated that opportunity to do it. And really one of the hardest decisions I made was taking that early retirement. I love flying the C-130 more than, any other thing that I've done professionally. And knowing that I was voluntarily giving up the potential opportunity to do that for a couple of more years was a very difficult and challenging decision to make. But for a lot of different reasons and things going on, it was the best decision at the time. And I don't regret it. I know that everything works out the way that it's supposed to, but it was a very hard decision to make.
I can definitely understand that because, I was a first sergeant of a 135 person company in Europe. Mm-hmm. And I tore a meniscus oddly enough, playing Frisbee football with my soldiers one morning during PT. Mm-hmm. And it did kind of mess my knee up pretty good. I had to have arthroscopic surgery. They didn't repair it. They just cut it. And so my running career was greatly affected, as you can imagine. Right. And, the PT we do, especially with the Marines and the Army. And I finally got to where, I had an opportunity to go to grad school while I was at Fort Benning as an instructor, and went back to Europe. And I looked at it and I said, well, it was a hard decision. So I understand what you're saying. I couldn't run with the soldiers anymore like I needed to. And I looked at that and I started looking at things. But then I looked at it too and I said, man, once I leave this uniform and I give this up, what's the next step? What is it going to be? So I can completely understand, your concern and that being a challenge. So,
well, that's a good point that you bring up too, because something else that was on my mind and I was aware of, at least to that point, was that I wasn't in the game like I used to be. I knew that I wasn't showing up the same, the way that I was, and I knew that there were some things that were preventing me from being the officer that I wanted to be. And I didn't feel it would be right to continue to serve for a number of years. So I'd rather somebody else that was really in it kind of take that position. Yeah.
And you're exactly right. Because that's how I felt, not being able to do things physically, that I needed to do, especially dealing with, ground units and soldiers on a daily basis. So I can completely understand that. You want to be able to give your all. And when you get to the point where you don't think you are, then you start kind of doubting, well, should I still be here? So I can definitely identify with that. So where were a few of the places you mentioned, some of the places you saw that, were not that good? Where were some of the places you went to that gave you that impression?
Yeah, we spent a number of months in Djibouti, Africa, and we'd often take off and fly around Somalia or around the areas around Djibouti. Okay. And then we did some missions into Mauritania and Burundi. And flying into Entebbe in Uganda, which coincidentally enough, I had an experience to fly back to that same airport just a few weeks ago. So it was interesting to come back now on a commercial plane instead of flying my own C-130 in. But when you fly into these places and it's dirt and just deserted area as far as you can see, and then you're looking at a pile of trash and then you realize that's somebody's house and that's a community that you thought was a landfill. Yeah, it's incredible. And that really inspired some work that I've done since leaving the Marine Corps. I started a small nonprofit. It's called 1 Million Gold, but I set a personal goal to help 1 million people gain access to clean drinking water because that's one of the things that is the biggest challenge around the world. Is nearly 1 billion people have access to clean drinking water. We think about all the other forms of suffering out there, all the many forms of suffering and poverty out there. So much of it stems back to this one basic fundamental human need that so many people don't have access to.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you about that. I wanted to talk to you about that. How did you get into that? That's such and what did it come from your experience of flying around, what you saw? Because that seems to be a very specific type of work or a need that you're trying to address. How did you do that?
Yeah, so this is so there was in one of my deployments to Djibouti, I was working with a gentleman by the name of Brandon Gelati. And one of the things that he would do in our downtime is he was designing patches and t-shirts and he was selling them to the people on the base. And I asked him what he was doing. He said, "Hell, I'm trying to raise money for a buddy of mine that's working on the water crisis." So that really piqued my interest, and through a series of conversations with him, that's where I began to understand about the severity of it and about how big of a scale this water crisis was. And then I decided, you ever have one of those experiences where you hear the same message come from 2 or 3 different places about the same time, and you realize, oh, this is a message for me. I need to hear this. Well, that message for me was the advice with our giving or with our philanthropic passions to invest in the one thing and find something that we're most passionate about, and then put our time and attention into that. So that we can feel the greatest return on it, and we can feel like we're making an impact. Like, what is the thing that excites us the most? What is the thing that we're most passionate about? What's the thing that makes us the saddest when we think about it? And for me at the time, it was water. So I decided before that period of time, I considered myself a serial giver, meaning, I didn't have a regular giving or tithing practice. I would just donate $100 here when somebody asked for it, $100 there. Yeah. And so I decided to narrow that down to one field. And when I was thinking, where can I make the greatest impact? I've got limited time, energy, and money. Where can I make the greatest impact? And I remember this one weekend where I was trying to decide where I should make a donation to. And there was a nonprofit that does a lot of research and development in the health and in the health field. And they were asking for money. And I realized, hey, I could take this $100 and I could donate it to this institution and they could do some good work with it. But really, this $100 isn't going to make much of an impact. It won't even be a blip on the radar in their fund that they are using. And then I found this other organization called Charity Water. And on their website, it said for every $20 donated, we can provide water and a life-saving measure to somebody in need. So I thought, with that limited resource, what's the thing that's going to make the greatest change of trajectory for somebody's life? And for me, it was water. What I understand is water. So I decided, all right, that's going to be my focus. And for whatever good I can do with it, that's what I want to impact. Because when you provide water to somebody, you're not just alleviating some temporary discomfort for a short period of time, but you're really planting a seed of hope. You're changing the trajectory of somebody's life. There's 30,000, 35,000 children that die every single week because of health or water-related illnesses that come from the water that they're drinking. If you can take that worry away from somebody, and now you got a kid that can engage in school, they're not dealing with the health consequences, they're not constantly worrying about ingesting something accidentally or unintentionally that kills them, and you really set their life on a new path. So it's to me, that's a very powerful and beautiful thing to be a part of.
Yeah, when I saw that, that was something I was going to ask you about, because it's just something that we hear so many programs for so many other causes and things like that, and I remember there used to be some on TV occasionally years back talking about providing clean water, but it's something that we just don't think about because I know we take it for granted so much. Yeah. So I think that's very interesting. Well, Garret, we're going to take just a short break here. And when we come back, I want to continue our discussion because I want to talk to you a little bit more about some of the other projects you're involved in and what you're doing. So for the audience out there, if you hold on, we'll be right back after you hear from our sponsors.
In service of our nation, you gave everything you had. You sacrificed your comfort, your peace, and sometimes even your well-being. Over 3 decades, Hill & Ponton has helped to be a guiding light for veterans seeking their rightful disability benefits. When our heroes are in need, we are not just lawyers, we're an ally, a team who understands the struggles you faced. If you're a veteran seeking the benefits you deserve, let us stand with you on this journey, because every battle deserves a hero, and no hero should fight alone.
All right, everyone, welcome back. And you've been watching the WGSN-DB Going Solo Veterans Corner. And our guest tonight, retired Marine pilot Garret Biss. And Garret, of course, is also doing some other very good work in addition to what we were just talking about with his water recovery program that he's trying to work with. But Garret, you seem to be, you're involved in so much. And, you really look like you're trying to give back with so much of your time. And I believe you got into the Valiant Path program. Was that a product of kind of came from what you experienced while you were in the Marine Corps and some of the challenges that you had as you left the Marines?
That certainly helped inspire it. So a couple of different things we'll talk about, but one is the Valiant Path. So that's a curriculum that I developed. So after I got out of the Marine Corps, I entered a really dark period of my life. Fortunately, I found some coaching and some mentorship to guide me through that. And on the back side of it, I was really inspired by a lot of the things that I was introduced to in the personal development space, or specifically the applied positive psychology or the science of human flourishing. And what I realized was that some friends of mine who had gone through more traditional support for substance-related issues or behavior-related issues, that there were a lot of things that I'd picked up or I'd learned that weren't being introduced. So the Valiant Path is really my effort to bring some of the best interventions, modalities, tools, daily practices, mindset work, and just wellness support to individuals that have struggled with a substance or a behavior in their life. And Valiant Path is a refinement of that program that's really geared towards veterans. The main focus is on helping veterans that have started a recovery journey reconnecting with themselves, reconnecting with the self-worth that they have, with the values, with the strengths that they have, learning to bring new joy or new passion back into their life, find a new mission or find a new sense of meaning, and really lean into the life that they want. I see a lot of individuals that have struggled with something in their past, and they find some great clinical support or great treatment to help them get out of the gutter and up onto the curb. Yeah. I really feel like my mission is helping individuals get from the curb up to where they want to be in their life.
Yeah. So you were talking about, what you were doing with this. And I think, I also experienced the number of those things, but it was a little later on after I retired as I got a little older before it really started to hit me. And I think that, as veterans, a lot of times, we struggle with our identity. And, I struggled for the longest time when PTSD hit me really badly. And our military mindset is that we're supposed to be strong. We're supposed to suck it up. We can't show weakness. And that was a mindset that required a big change for myself personally, to be able to finally admit that I needed help and to deal with that. So do you target anything like that, or is that part of what you're doing?
Absolutely. And on two fronts. And one thing I've really become aware of or more in tune with recently is, I think, a catalyst, or at least a better explanation for why so many veterans struggle and then they'll suffer in silence, or they'll bottle things up and they won't seek help. There's something that's inspired into us in our culture in the military about service. So we always want to be of service, and we want to be of the greatest service that we can to our country and to our loved ones. But with that, there's also an element of suffering or sacrifice that comes along with that service. And we're proud of it, and we're willing to lean into it. We're willing to be uncomfortable. We're willing to do hard things for the right reason and for good reasons of protecting people back home. Unfortunately, I think a lot of times we get that message entangled that somehow suffering and service are related, or our level of service and the value that we derive from it is somehow measured by or equivalent to the amount of suffering that we're in. And this can be true, like when we're willing to lean into something and suffer through difficult and challenging times. But after the service, if we don't realize that that suffering is, that's not a part of service. That's not a part of our value. Our value doesn't come from our ability to endure hard times and difficult times. It really comes from something else. It's really, we have innate value in us. We're certainly all lovable and acceptable as we are, and we don't need to suffer to prove that or to create that deserving or that worth. So that's something I've come in touch with. And then a recent mission that I've been on is helping veterans better understand some of those challenges that we face when we transition. I went through a very dark time. Fortunately, I found my way out of it. I'm glad that you found some tools and some things to help you get out of that. But one of the things I found most challenging as I transitioned and as I was really in that darkest place was not understanding what was going on. Like what was this void inside? What was this loss of identity? What was this disconnect? I knew something was missing, but I couldn't put my finger on it or wasn't really sure what that was. So that was my message with the recent TEDx talk that I did, was just helping veterans better understand that challenge. And that's that website, unspokentrauma.vet, if anybody'd like to check out that TEDx talk. But the spoiler alert, the quick version of that message is that we have fundamental human needs as individuals. And the way that we meet those fundamental human needs in the military changes when we get out. And the first, these fundamental human needs include connection. We need connection to other people. We're tribal creatures. We need to be part of a group, part of an organization, part of a tribe in order to do our best. And when we leave the military, we lose that level of connection that we have. That kind of connection that we experience in the military is not like any kind of connection, that many people ever find outside of the military. That willingness to do hard things and to go into difficult situations and to experience and endure suffering for the people beside us, that's not something that's common outside of the military. The other thing that comes along with that, this permission to be part of a tribe, is authenticity or a positive self-identity. We need to show up how we are, be able to express what we think, how we feel, and ask for what we need without fear that it will jeopardize that connection. And a lot of veterans, myself included, and many of the veterans that I talk to, when they transition out of the military, they quickly find that they're cut from a different cloth, and they don't really, they really don't fit in with those people that they're trying to fit in. We still have this need for connection. So what a lot of veterans will do is they'll start to hide parts of themselves or keep things to themselves so that they can get that connection. Unfortunately, as we hide parts of ourselves to get that connection, it comes at a cost to our own sense of self-worth and a questioning of our identity as we try to fit in. So these are just two of the fundamental human needs that we lose as we transition out of the military, and something I was never prepared for. And a lot of the people I talked to, there was no preparation in those transition classes about, hey, here's some serious mental health and emotional challenges that you're going to go through. And this is why. These are some things that you're going to experience. So that was the mission of the TEDx talk, was just to help, put a name or put a voice to those challenges that veterans face so they can better understand it. Because if you can understand the pain or the difficult time that you're in and where it comes from, then you can find that hope and you can see a path beyond it. And that's what I want for all veterans that are finding themselves in that place.
So you mentioned your TEDx talks. You travel around quite a bit with those, don't you?
So this was a one-time event, and it was recorded in April of last year, but now it lives online. But it is a message that I continue to share. Recently, I've been sharing it a lot in the mental health field. So speaking with individuals that are either in the addiction or mental health field that work with veterans so that they can better understand the veteran population. I think that there's this misconception or this miscorrelation between a veteran that struggles and the common perception is that I've found is that if somebody sees a veteran struggling, they automatically think, okay, if it's PTSD, then it's related to something on the battlefield or some mishap that they experienced in training, which could be true and is true for a lot of veterans. But for every veteran, they go through this transition and they go through this loss or this fundamental change in how they can meet their basic human needs. And that in and of itself, I found that I believe can be a traumatic experience. So a lot of veterans, myself included, I couldn't think of something that had happened to me in combat or something that I had experienced, particularly during my military career, that was traumatic. So I couldn't pinpoint or I couldn't tie back to a certain event or circumstance that I could then take to a clinician and say, hey, help me deal with this or help me process this. But what I came to find out was a lot of the challenges that I faced came just from that transition and just from trying to find my way in that, in that new world and figuring out who I was and what my place was in the world.
Yeah, it's so interesting to listen to you talk about the transition, because I wish I'd have had something like this available when I made that transition back in 2001. That was when I was retired. So you can see I'm one of those old guys.
Yeah.
I've since retired from my second career. So, but
Mhm.
I didn't, there wasn't a lot of this. And I
Right.
remember when I retired, I went through the transition center there in Europe, where I was retired from, but it
Right.
was all geared towards the administrative stuff to get you out of the
Yeah.
service. Nobody mentioned what you'd be dealing with after, and nobody talked to you about where you might be able to go to get help when you left the service.
Right.
So it seems like, now so much has changed with what's going on. And I didn't find out about getting help with my PTSD till it really came on a few years later and hit me
Mhm.
really badly. And thank goodness, my primary care physician at the military clinic referred me to the right place.
Fantastic.
So, but other than that, I knew nothing about that when I retired. And it
Right.
seems like there's so much more of this available now with what you're doing.
Mhm. And that was the message or my mission for that TEDx talk. I just wanted to, to plant the seed to help people better understand it. Not just the veterans that are going through it, but any loved ones or any working professionals that work with veterans,
Yeah.
to have a little bit clearer image of what's going on. And, to your point about that transition, for some individuals, they really hit that dark place and they really struggle right away. For me, it was pretty quick. For a lot of other veterans I talked to, it was around like the 3-year mark when their body realized, hey, we're not getting orders and we're not going to another duty station. And then the reality sinks in that this is your duty station for life now, that in the first Civ Div. So that's a real challenge. And one thing I always like to plug and point out to individuals, so this is something I just learned about recently, but there was some legislation passed in 2023, and I think it became full effect this year. But through the Compact Act, any veteran who's having a mental health crisis, you can go to any medical facility, any ER, any treatment facility, and be seen. They have to admit you, and the VA will pick up the tab. So for anybody that's, if you find that dark place, you don't know where to turn, you don't know where there's potential resource, just go to the nearest treatment facility or emergency room, and they'll have to see you and help you get connected.
Yeah, that's a good point. I remember reading that a little while back. I don't remember where it was, but I do remember reading that. And I kind of thought about that. I said, that's really, really a good idea with a lot of things, given the fact that we're still in the neighborhood of about 20 veterans a day committing suicide. And there are so many people out there in need of help. And you with Valiant Path and what you're trying to do, I think just speaks well for not only yourself, but other veterans who are coming out of the military, reaching out to their fellow veterans. So I see that you're also continuing on the Civil Air Patrol.
That's right. So, flying is just, it's a part of my DNA now, and I just feel most alive sometimes when I'm flying a plane. So I do have an opportunity now to fly with a Civil Air Patrol at a local squadron here in North Carolina. It's not the C-130, but it's still fun to get up, even if it's in a Cessna 182 or 172, especially when we have the opportunity. So we are an Air Force auxiliary. So sometimes we get called to do some missions in support of the Air Force or in support of some of the other services. And one of my favorite ones is working with the Army air traffic controllers as they're learning how to talk on the radio and how to control traffic around the pattern. A lot of times right before they're doing when they're doing some pre-deployment training, we'll have the opportunity to go work with them and help some of the young soldiers get used to controlling aircraft, which is pretty neat to continue that mission and feel like I'm on the other side of it, right? Like helping prepare that next generation that's going forward.
Yeah, I never knew much about the CAP. I know my grandfather from my mother's side of the family, he was an officer in the CAP back in the 50s and 60s. So that's all I knew about him. And I saw pictures of him in his uniform but I'd never really, especially young, never really understood what the CAP was. Now of course I have a better understanding of it. So you still get to do your flying, and you're working
just a little bit, not quite enough, but just a little bit.
Well, enough to kind of keep your feet wet, right?
Right, that's it, and not have to come out of pocket to pay for it. That was one of the things that they told me in early flight school. They say, how that you have the best job in the military because pilots will pay to go do their job when they're off duty. So on the weekends, pilots will go rent planes and fuel it up with their own dollars to go fly it around. Like how many other professions, how many lawyers or doctors do you hear will come out of pocket to go do their profession when they're not working? So I was like, yeah, that's a pretty good point. It's pretty cool opportunity.
Yeah, so you're involved in so much with all these initiatives and CAP still now, and I also understand that you've also written a book.
Yeah, a couple of books and some more in the works. But the first book that I published called Charity: The Gifts of Giving, and this is something that has really kind of inspired me and caught my attention, is how much benefit we get when we're doing things of service or being of service to other people. And that doesn't just mean working with a charity or making a donation. It just means any time that we do something with the benefit of another person in mind. And during some of my dark periods, I took on a challenge to experiment with little acts of kindness or little acts of service. And I saw a lot of the benefits that came from it. So I wrote a short book just explaining to other individuals, some of the benefits, because my philosophy or my understanding is, if you go out and you do something good that benefits another person, and if you're doing it from a purely altruistic reason, or if you're doing it from a selfish place because you know that you're feeling bad and you know that you'll feel better if you do something for somebody else, who cares why you're doing it? Like the world's going to get better because of that. If you're working at the soup kitchen this Saturday and you're serving a meal to somebody who's hungry, he doesn't care why you're there. He just cares that his life is a little bit better because of something that you did. So there's many benefits that we can get. I think everything that we do in our life, we want an emotional, a physiological, or a spiritual benefit from it. And through service and through charity or doing something for other people, I think that's one of the few things, if not the only thing, that we can do that provides all of those benefits for us at once. So it's a beautiful thing, something I highly encourage other people to make a more regular part of their life. And that's what the first book was about.
Well, I got to tell you, I mean, it's so interesting to sit and listen to, all the things that you've been involved in since you left the military. And I just want to say it's a credit to all the things you're trying to do. And for our audience out there, you can find out more at info@garretbiss.com. There you go. And
if you want to send me an email, please do. If there's anything that you'd like to talk about, any questions you'd like to ask, any way I can be of service to any listeners or any organizations that they're working with, then please do reach out.
Yeah. And Garret, I got to tell you, like I said, I'm really, and I'm not just saying this, I'm really impressed with all the things that you've been trying to do, and especially the way you're trying to help other veterans, go through some of these and work through some of these things that we experience. But before we wrap up, I do want to ask you one more question. And if you had one message that you could share with the audience tonight, what would it be?
So for anybody that's listening, if you're going through a hard time, no matter what you're facing and no matter how you feel about your life, your situation, know that you are lovable and acceptable just as you are. Know that you have innate value, you have inherent value, you have strengths. There's a lot of value with who you are, and there's a lot that you're capable of doing. And if you're in a dark place, if you're in a hard time, sometimes it's hard to see that, or it's hard to see that for yourself. But know that I believe that you're lovable and valuable and that you have a lot that you can continue to give. Sometimes I think of life like a pendulum, and I say that because the further it swings in one direction, the further the potential it has to swing in the other direction. So for the darkest times that you're in, that's where you're going to gain the skills and the compassion or the awareness or that drive and ambition to do some incredible things and experience a lot of joy and a lot of happiness in your life. So know that good times are going to come. As long as you reach out, as long as you find the tools, the support, whatever that is, know that you're worth it. You're worth finding that path out of the darkness. So please reach out. Please find that tool or that path that'll get you there.
You know what I have to tell you, Garret, I want to thank you for that, because that's such an excellent point. And I struggled with that myself. So I know firsthand, you got to do that. And I've often told the veterans on the show, come through other topics, that, you can't do it by yourself. You have to reach out, you have to get help, and know that there's people out there that'll help you. So that's an excellent point. Well, Garret, I got to tell you, it's been great having you on the show. And I really want to thank you so much for coming on and spending some time with us this evening and sharing your experiences and what you're doing now. And again, for the audience, you see it up there, info@garretbiss.com. So if you'd like to reach out to Garret and find out more or ask questions, please do so. He's more than addressed that he's welcome for you to do that. So we hope you will do that. And Garret, thank you so much for spending the time with us this evening.
Thank you, Paul. I really appreciate this opportunity, and thank you for all the work that you're doing to give voice to veterans and to help the veteran community.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Garret. And for those of you in the audience out there, just a tidbit for tonight. There are disaster and other help available. Veterans info, get disaster and other VA assistance. There's the website, va.gov/resources, disaster/help. They'll get on there and give you information. They'll talk to you about grants that are available if you're in the hurricane zone, disaster area. There are grants, there are loans, there are all kinds of other help out there that the VA talks about on the website. So especially for those of you that may have been through these recent storms, if you weren't aware, check it out on the VA website and find out what assistance is available for you. So I want to thank our audience for joining us tonight in our discussion with Garret. And we also want to thank all of our veterans out there. Thank you so much for your service and all that you do for the country and for your families too, for supporting you. So we hope to see you on our next show, and we all hope that you have an opportunity to continue on and live your best life. So thank you so much for joining us this evening.